I get this correct, and we got this going. And I'm a walker because I like sports and I'm an athlete, and I think athletes don't stay still, they move. Probably the biggest honor for me is to have my name associated with Dr. Murray. You know, it's he doesn't know it, but I was in the audience many times when he was on the podium, and when he spoke, you know, I always wanted to be very quiet because I know I always learn something. And so it's incredibly humbling for me to come here as a visiting professor in his name. So I know we gave him one round of applause, but that just wasn't enough. I'd like to give him another one for everything he's done for our society. Made the Southern really a special place, and I still think the Southern Thoracic Surgical Association is one of my favorite meetings because people are honest and the science is great. So I'm going to try not to bore you today, because if I talked about thoracic surgery, who the hell would come? Let's be honest. Not many of you are doing thoracic or cardiac, but I think the lessons that we learn in that operating room can be applied everywhere. And so I'm going to talk about this because that's what I think everyone in this room does every day. And the problem is we should be giving this speech to the 20% of Americans that we know about that aren't doing this, but they would never show up for it, would they? Because we're preaching to the choir in a bit. But this is what we do. This is what we do as surgeons, as nurses, as medical students, as people, as fathers, as spouses, whatever. This is what we do. But do we do this? Do we do it for pursuits that offer endless significance? And I think one of my main points would be, I'm not sure. I spent my whole career trying to become, you know, the best lung surgeon in the world. That was my goal. And then if you get close to that, or you think that you're close to that, you ask yourself, does that really offer endless significance? Sure the hell doesn't. Because if I passed away tomorrow, what does that mean? Every person I've operated on will probably die in 5 to 10 years, even if I did a great job. Every paper I've written is going to be obsolete in 5 years, because it should be. We should evolve. And so what is it that you leave? And I think that's what we want to talk about. And when you're really young, or if your spouse is still alive, and my spouse of 22 years isn't, she passed away a year and a half ago, that makes you look at things differently. Very differently. And that's one of my main talks and reasons for this. So financial disclosures, you have to do this today. I will tell you that I have a great passion for coaching. I've coached 52 Little League teams. I have 3 boys. You'll see pictures of them during this lecture to keep you awake. And I have a passion for it. But of course, I didn't get paid very much money to coach Little League teams. Nor did I get paid to coach medical students or teach residents, but yet I love it. But now I get paid to do it. You know, I get to proctor, I go to hospitals and proctor surgeons in the operating room, either open or robotic or VATS lobectomies, and I actually get paid. And I get paid because there's a company now that has a monopoly in the robotic world, Intuitive. So I have to disclose that, because I'm going to talk about teaching. I'm going to talk about how I think we've done a really poor job teaching and credentialing surgeons to do things, and we can do much better. And I've devised this thing called PRIME, which stands for a programmatic robotic, but the word robotic can be deleted because of what we've been doing with our kids since they were 2 years old. Minimally invasive mentoring experience. And what that means, it's a way to teach people to buy into a culture that's going to foster better outcomes. And because I've had a couple of people go to my lectures who have to do with a publishing company, they asked me to write a book. And I've written this book, and I'm glad to say that 2 weeks ago, it was the #1 seller for this publisher, which means nothing because they don't publish. They publish no-name authors like me. You know, they sell 5 books a week. But this sold 800 copies a couple weeks ago because Nick Saban made some of the Alabama football players read it, and that made it take off. And some other Division I coaches are making their players read it, and some deans of some medical schools, etc. So because of that, some people are reading it, and that's a great honor for me. This started off really. It was called this, The Athleticism of Surgery. That was the title. And the editor said, well, heck, I don't want to just sell it to surgeons or athletes. We want to sell. I said, listen, no one's going to buy it. The author is a nobody. I get that. What do you think? Let me ask you a question. What do you think if you wrote a book, how many do you think would sell a week? What's the average number of books that would be sold a week? I assume you're not a famous author. Yeah. Yeah, well, so, but your mom can only buy so many. My mom bought 799 of those 800 probably. But it's actually 2 a week. So if you sell 100 a year as a no-name author, that's average. I mean, I think that's embarrassing. but I'm a no-named author. But it was interesting by changing the title to this, which I don't really love, although I do like this and this. I came up with those two insignias. I like that. My kids are mad. That's not me on the cover. I said, why the hell would I put myself on the cover? I don't want to be on the cover of the book. But, or why aren't they in the book? I said, I definitely don't want you guys in the book. But it was fun to write. It's a learning experience. And so I have to disclose this because I actually get 75 cents for every book that or maybe it's 70 cents for every book that is sold. So my outline is this. What makes up your day when you think about it as a doctor or surgeon, right? We're all going to have our pregame meal, get ready mentally and physically, go to the operating room, and we're going to toil at a task, and it's work. I still love it. I got my MBA 2 years ago, and I'm not ready to hang my cleats up and become an administrator at this point, but I think you can do both very, very well. There's some people that are going to go do more in the operating room, others are going to do more administration, but if you really want to be great at one, it's hard to do both of them very, very well. And so I'm not ready to completely use the MBA, but I'm positioning myself later in my life. But I still love the challenge of digging my cleats in and trying to hit a guy throwing 95 with a slider. I still like that. And that's what a difficult lobectomy can be at times. But that's just part of it. Because when you come home, how many people here are married? Good, the vast majority. So I think you'll all get it. When you come home and you have another hat. And of course, if you're like me, you know, that hat's important, but when you're doing 8 operations a day, you know, it's kind of hard to be great at home, to be a great father, to be a great spouse, a great husband. And as surgeons, as MDs, we have all these other roles. And really our goal should be to perform each one of those better every day. And it's really hard to do. I mean, it's really hard to do. My wife, of course, would have come with me on a trip like this if she was still alive, and she would have been mad because as soon as I landed, what happens? Cell phone goes on, got a consult, got to talk to a patient who went home 2 days, has a question, you know, but I enjoy it. What makes me good, obviously I'm not tall, I'm not smart, I'm not good looking, is that I'm available. And availability is everything, even when you travel. And so I'm not willing to give that up, but at times it drove my wife crazy when we were on vacations. That's the silver lining now of being single. I can work all the time. But how do you measure the outcomes? That's really the question I want you to think about. And tomorrow I'm going to talk about that because I got an incredible database. In fact, the STS used my database to help set up their own. That was a great honor for me. And I add a column every single year in that database. But you ever have a column for how many kids' sporting events you missed? Or how many times you were late with a birthday party for a nephew or a niece? Or how many times that you missed something with your wife you were supposed to go to or your husband? Should you have a column for that? I think you should. I think the only way to really be great at something is to look at your results and objectify them and be inherently consistent at self-examination. So I think our culture is this. Our culture is an illumination of our values. And what are values? Well, our values are what get instilled in us very early. Probably everybody here, or most people here, had probably pretty strong parents. And you know, your parents are really your first coach. And so at my presidential address, I was incredibly blessed to have my parents, who were 88 and 84, and my wife's parents there. My wife wasn't there, unfortunately. She had died 5 months earlier, but they were there. And I talked a lot about that. And so, you know, I'm sure you talk to your parents and thank them, but you probably don't thank them enough. How many people here have kids? Okay, the majority, and I'm sure you heard that from your kids. But that's the number one thing in your life, or your children. That's your legacy. And are you checking the outcomes of your children objectively? I bet you you're not. And I can show you in my book, talks about some ways to do that. And so what do your parents teach you? My dad, of course, was a surgeon, a urologist, still is a surgeon in my mind, even though he's 88. It was this: accountability. Own it, right? Take pride in your work and own it. And so in my book, I talk about this thing of lines of gratification because it started when I was a boy with this. Now, this is my backyard, not my parents'. But, you know, if you look at it carefully, when you're done, if you do a good job, you just love to see those lines. You know, this is our football field in the back. This is a batting cage. We have a world-class batting cage for my kids here. And then I've got a basketball court on the other side. But I love this because it's an instantaneous gratification. You look back at your work, and believe me, we will never have a riding mower at my house. It's going to be a push mower, because that's what the kids and I do. Because if you don't toil at the task, you don't enjoy it. When was the last time you enjoyed something that you got that was easy? You don't value it. You only value the things that are hard. You only value the things that you toil at in the hot sun. Whether it's becoming a surgeon, which is a long trip, or whether it's cutting the lawn that takes 4 hours on Saturday if you're efficient. You can do it. So what are our lines of gratification now? Well, then they were those wheel marks in the lawn, the moist lawn. And now they're looking back at your subcuticular skin closure. Are they really any different? When you're closing the skin, be honest, doesn't it give you an incredible satisfaction? You've done a good operation and the skin looks good. Isn't that really a line of gratification? And there's many different types. There's in baseball, where I played in college, or your bank account. I know a lot of people who love this line of gratification. They want to see those numbers go up. Or now I become a personal certified trainer. So I train on Saturday morning and Sunday afternoon. And so I've gotten to this. Unfortunately, I don't look like this cat, unfortunately. But I'm not sure I want to look like that guy. He's probably on some juice. But my point is, there's other lines of gratification curves that you get into. And so I think you should ask yourself, what are yours? And really write them down and ask if they align with your culture. Do those values align with what you want to teach your children, what you want to teach your spouse, what it says about you, and what it says about your culture? And I think it depends. It depends who you are and where you are. So in surgery, we're really good at making lines and looking at our outcomes. This looks at all my mortality and morbidity from over 15,000 operations that I've performed, over 2,000 consecutive lobectomies that I've performed. And I'm very proud, certainly not of this number, because Gordon, you're not going to be too happy with that initial mortality. I'm sorry, but that's my number of my first 100 lobectomies. 3%, that's embarrassing, but that's where I was. Now look at it. My last 600, we've had 1 death. And that is incredible for me. That's because I'm doing them all minimally invasively. And I did not want to evolve. I was the world's busiest open surgeon. I got a whole bunch of numbers to prove it. I was doing more thoracotomy and lobectomies than anybody in the world. I didn't need to change. People are going to still come because of the, quote, reputation. But as I saw the data, I really wasn't doing the right thing. I wasn't evolving. And you have to evolve. And becoming a robotic surgeon was painful. It was ugly. I did not want to do it. I mean, to be a full professor and have people coming from other countries for surgery and going back on the learning curve is hard. But what did I say at the beginning of the lecture? What do you value that's easy? If you really believe that that end point is worth it, like my 17-year-old son last night, he's getting recruited now by a whole bunch of major league teams. He's a junior in high school. He's being recruited by some great Division I schools. He really believes that that's what he wants to do. He wants to be a doctor later, like my older son, but start off in baseball. Great. If that's what your goal is, you got to be willing to work out. So last night, you know, at 10 o'clock, we went down in the gym. I'd already worked out once. The kid's killing me. I did a workout with him for 40 minutes. But it's the commitment to excellence that matters. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's you want to get in good shape or you want to be the world's greatest artist. It's the process that you have to value, I think. And then I, unfortunately, and I'll be honest, was a typical surgeon. Pretty egocentric, pretty overconfident, very into my own numbers, which I just showed you, but really didn't think about my team's numbers because my team didn't matter because I'm a big surgeon, right? Well, that's wrong. So this just shows the numbers of operations I did in yellow per year. And you see I did several years over 1,000. And then I hired a partner. But the thing I'm proudest about are those blue bars. And I talk about this in my presidential address. In fact, that's going to be published in the annals here in a couple of months. And I talk about this slide because it's really hard for the senior attendings here to give cases up to the junior attendings. And you guys all want them. We get it. That's great. But we're also responsible for the outcome because it reflects on our department and our division and our patients and our reputation. The same goes true to the junior attending to the resident and the resident to the medical student. So everybody wants to operate and do it, but we're under a microscope today and understand the pressure that is on that attending surgeon when he or she gives you some of the case. Sometimes it's not appropriate for him or her to give it to you. Don't take it so personally. Understand it may be the time of the day, the patient, the team that maybe isn't experienced, or some other factor going on. Don't take it so personally if you don't do it. So I think a lecture is great if it gives ideas, but it's a complete waste of your time if I've given you nothing but ideas and I haven't done anything to change your behaviors. So I would ask you to really try to have an exercise when you go home tonight and ask yourself, what floats your boat? What are your lines of gratification? Really, what does it get you up in the morning? I mean, you could stay in bed, call in sick. We don't do that because it's not our culture, but you could. Why don't you? And ask yourself why you do what you do. And then list them. And then what I always tell my kids is if you're not getting better every day, if you're not evolving any day, you're not an athlete. You're not an athlete, you're not a super performer, because you got to get better every day. Create a culture of excellence around you and assess what you do on your free time, because that helps define who and what you are. Now, everybody here is a bar raiser. We all raise the bar. We all say, okay, well, if our mortality was 3.2% for the first 100, and now it's 0.2% for the last 600, now we can make it 0.18 or 0.1. That's the problem with the bar raiser. You can always raise the bar. You see what happens? You become a neurotic. You become a nutcase. Because all you're doing is trying to infinitesimally get better. And you can drive yourself crazy. That's true of everybody in this room. Especially me. And when I started thinking about it, especially with my kids, because I'm always raising them. I just had a talk with my son. You know, we were in Harvard. He went to Dartmouth and Harvard for an interview for as a junior, that unofficial visit this past weekend. And when I left, he had gotten a B+ on an English test. So I circled this morning on the breakfast table. I circled it and put a little note and said, Harvard reject, right next to that B+ on his grade, because I'm pushing them. So I'm no better. But I want to push them. I want them to get better, but it's got to come from within. And so it's great to raise the bar, but you got to love the process of it. If you don't enjoy the process of raising the bar, you're wasting your time, because you may not get over that hurdle, but it's okay. So I think this is probably the single most important thing I can tell you. It's great to want to be a master, and it's great to try to continually achieve mastery, but you got to understand it's not obtainable, but you enjoy the process, because I really do. So I think we are like athletes, that we have a hand skill under pressure, and that's what we do. And I used a whole bunch of strategies in high school and college, to be an All-American high school athlete playing 3 sports and then playing baseball in college. And I thought of things that I did in, at times when the game was on the line and stuff. And what we did is the same stuff we do in the operating room. And the book goes into this. I'll skip through it here. But there's many ways to visualize yourself, either from an announcer watching yourself perform if you're nervous or a little shaky that day, or put eyeballs on the end of your fingers and see the instruments in a nice and relaxed state, or find ways to relax yourself. And there's lots of strategies that actually work, but only if you practice them. You have to have preparation and practice to be able to get that muscle memory when you're in trouble, when there's a big hole in the pulmonary artery, or you're in bleeding and you're in trouble, or you didn't get a good night's sleep the night before, or you had a stupid fight with your wife in the morning, and you can't bring that to work because you're a professional. And so when I was a shortstop, the year before I was All-American, nobody talks about it, I was horrible. I had 12 or 13 errors in the 30-game season. And my son looks at these stats and says, you were terrible. First, some of those errors I don't think I deserved, I want to be honest, but I'll take them. But what changed? I didn't get bigger, I didn't get stronger, I didn't get faster. I was able to change my internal cadence in my clock. And I poured a bottle of calmness over my shoulders every inning before I went out. I literally pictured a bottle that had just calmness in it, and I poured it over me. And I've given that to residents, because sometimes the residents, right, are just really shaky and nervous. You just give them that image. Now they have to practice it. It's amazing what that can do. So, and then I think of my wife, because my wife was just so different than me. She's so smart and classy and quiet and calm and everything I'm not. And I envisioned her and her image. This is even before she passed away. And my golden retriever. I hate to say that, I put my wife and golden retriever in the same statement, but it's true. I have a beautiful golden retriever who's unbelievably calm. So find some image that you can import at times when you need to. And so I think we as surgeons are this. We may have a horrible outcome, and you got to go right back and perform. You're like a relief pitcher that blows a big save. Can't dwell on it. You got to live in the moment. And there's a lot to say about that. And think about what drives you day after week after month after year. What is there worth living for? Well, there's love, there's your family, but when you're a surgeon, it's your patient. It's a mastery of that operation, or 5 or 6 or 7 operations that you do frequently. And if you're an athlete, it's dedication to your sport. But I submit to you, if you're a mom, it's motherhood. Or if you're a father, it's fatherhood, etc. Surgery is sort of our code of honor. It's our courage, and it's our virtue. But the problem is this. It's our mistress. And every surgeon here, if they want to be honest with themselves, sometimes you really like it. You don't mind if you miss a get-together with the in-laws if you have an operation. Let's be honest. That you enjoy the challenge in the operating room over listening to stuff you really don't want to listen to. And so it does seduce you. And we do use it in a way as a mistress. And we just need to think about that and be honest with ourselves about it. And a lot is said about ego and surgeons, and we all get it. Now, in today's age, of course, ego has to be checked a little bit at the door. The day of the surgeon throwing stuff and hitting stuff and yelling at people is almost over, but not at UAB, but a few surgeons that we've had to have this talk with. Ego's great. What do you teach your children? You teach them to love themselves so they don't hurt their finite gifts that the good Lord bestows upon them. And you need it to build. So it's something that you teach. But the problem is excess ego, like I would say my 3 boys all have too much of, leads to that. And there's a fine line between the surgeon who is confident and the surgeon who is arrogant. And finding that balance between work and home and the balance between ego and humility is difficult. And I think humility is really poorly understood. I asked my middle son last weekend how he defined humility, and he spoke to the guys at the Alabama Honors College, pre-med, and he gave me an answer like he's, I don't know, in 2nd grade. That's the worst answer I've ever heard in my life. Then I asked the other 2 boys, and it wasn't much better. But I think humility is this. It's not thinking less about yourself, but really thinking about yourself less often, and having respect for other people's cultures, which is really hard to do today with our young kids. I find that a lot of my kids' friends don't respect other people's cultures. Everything's a big joke in social media, and it's not that funny. So I think you have to learn how to shrink the playing field in your mind, because you can be the world's greatest neurosurgeon, but you're nobody as soon as you leave that operating room. You're just a guy who's going to go home and take the garbage out and be a good spouse and be a good husband or a good wife. That's the point. You got to learn how to shrink the playing field. And I think about this in my athletic career in college, and boy, I carried my ego long before the game started and long after it was over, way after the post-game interview with the media. I mean, I would go home and still think I was great. I really didn't get that message. And so I think you've got to find a way to just make it invisible under your uniform, and we've all traded our uniforms in now for surgical scrubs, but it's the same thing. It's the playing field where you're working under pressure under the white lights. Have your ego exist really only between the fine white lines of the playing field or the red tape that marks the sterile area for the surgical field. Have it really exist only between your ears, where you don't have to yell at somebody on your team, i.e. the scrub nurse or the circulator, because really you're under pressure and you want them to perform at your level and you don't think they buy into your value system, but they do, but in a different way. And you got to find a way to get your team to all perform well. And you know, yelling at them doesn't get it done. And I'm big into preparation, to the point where I've driven my kids crazy about this. But the truth is, you're right, you can't prepare for everything, but you can prepare your response when things go poorly and adversity. So coaching. You know, the best athletes in the world have coaches, don't they? And they hit a baseball or kick a soccer ball. But what do? Well, we just operate on people and have their lives in our hand. But we don't have a coach once we finish our training. I don't think that makes any sense. And that's what prime is about. I know I'll do better if I have a coach with me, no question about it. Someone who can tell me, you could have done a little better here, you could have done a little better there, and I love that criticism. So maybe you don't call him a coach, maybe you call him an advisor or a mentor or a mentalist or all these other terms for them, but whatever it is, it's really a parent. And so we as attendings that are privileged enough to have residents and fellows and medical students, they're really our legacy. They're really our children. And if we treated all the medical students the way we treat our kids at home, although not my case because I'm really bad to my kids, but if I treated them better than like when my kids were young and I didn't have much expectation from them, I think that we would do better. Because the medical students, usually when they first come to the operating room, are like little kids. They're just getting used to this whole scary ambiance. And so I think we need to look at it in a different way. You have to love them. And there's some, I'll be honest with you, I don't even like. I've had a couple of medical students, I don't even like them as people. I'll be honest, I don't. But you have to love them anyhow, because that's the job. You got to love them, you got to teach them, and you got to have that kind of respect for them. And if teaching equals coaching, and coaching is a great opportunity, and opportunity is an honor, and certainly all those things are true, then the correlate is absolutely true. That, you know, teaching is an honor. I've been offered a few incredible jobs over the last year, and a lot of them don't have medical students, and they don't understand why that's so important to me. I understand it's a lot more money on the other side, I get it, but that is something I really enjoy. That's what Prime does, this programmatic, robotic, minimally invasive mentoring experience to really coach professors and associate professors in this way. So training. Like my son last night, it doesn't work if the student or the athlete isn't initiated. So I can want my son to be the world's greatest volleyball player, but he doesn't want to do it. Guess what? It ain't going to happen. So if it doesn't come from within, it's not going to work. I think we all know that. That's certainly true here. You can't train the uninitiated, or in today's age, what I would call the government restricted. And I think we have allowed, we've bit into this whole thing hook, line, and sinker of these 60 or 80 hours. It's ridiculous. How the hell are you going to get good at anything doing it for 80 hours a week? You can't. You can't. It's going to take you longer, and it's going to be harder for you than it was for me. In 1988, when I was a resident, that was the median number of operations we finished with. That's the data. 2,340. The median. I finished with 3,300 operations as a resident because I wasn't married and I didn't take the vacation. I enjoyed it. They made me take 3 days my last year because I got in trouble, but I enjoyed it. It was great. It was my passion. And I didn't need, and there wasn't anywhere to go. I could go see my mom and dad on the weekends. But in 2010, look, that's the median. Who's going to be better? A guy who has 2,340 at-bats or a guy who's got 750 at-bats? Just tell me, who's going to get better? It's not rocket science as to what's going to happen. And so everyone knows the book, The Outliers and 10,000 Hours, right? I mean, we all know this theory. It's true, especially under pressure. Under pressure, you need that muscle memory and that training to get you through it. And a lot of people here are going to be great minimally invasive surgeons. What are you going to do when you have to open? If you're not as good open as you are minimally invasive. That's the big concern that I think we have as attendings. And so here's our current system, and I love West Virginia State Archives. I love that. I actually showed this in my presidential address, this exact slide, and it fits into what I had in my operating room yesterday. Today's Tuesday. Yesterday, I had 8 cases yesterday. I had 2 robotic lobes and several other rooms going. I had a high school student sitting there, and just like this girl. I mean, it was like, oh my God, that's the guy's heart and lung. This is friggin' awesome. I mean, that's what that student was like. High school, senior in high school, wants to be a doctor. Then I had 2 college students there, just like these 2, who were interested in medicine. One had done a scrub tech year, so I'd been there. Wasn't that much, and all the other one was. Then I had a PGY2 in general surgery. Then I had a PGY5 in general surgery. Then I had a cardiothoracic fellow. Then I had a robotic fellow from University of Maryland who's an associate professor who was there for me for 3 weeks. And then I had my partner was in the back. All there. And I'm teaching all of them. Am I? Am I really doing a good job? I think I am, but probably not. How can you teach everybody here in a single classroom? You can't, because they've all got different goals, different expectations. And I got to finish the case in an hour and 40 minutes, or I'm underneath my bar, because a robotic lobe shouldn't take more than an hour and 40 minutes skin to skin. That's my own bar that I've set. Shouldn't lose more than 20 cc's of blood. Should be out of the operating room in an hour and 40 minutes. Patient should go home in 2 days. That's our goals. That's our average. We don't want to be below the average. So you're under your own pressures as well. So if you're going to train people less often because we're governmentally restricted, then we have to train them more efficiently. Who's this guy? Very good. Who said that? Very good. How'd you know? You all right, and what did he do? Which ocean? Sure was an ocean? Miracle on the Hudson. Who said that? That's great. So tell everybody the story. The one engine hit a whole bunch of seagulls, and so did the other one. And he lost both engines about 5 minutes after takeoff from New York. And he landed on that water. Incredible, right? But what you don't know, that wasn't the first time he landed an airplane on water. It was the 43rd time. 43rd. It was the only time there were people behind him. The other time was in a simulator. So that's what we need to do in medicine and surgery. If we can't be in the OR as much, because I was there 110 hours a week, but probably half the time I was screwing around and really wasn't working, right? Let's be honest. You're at the cafeteria, you're flirting with a nurse, you're waiting for anesthesia to put somebody away. Let's be honest. But if we're only going to be there 80 hours, let's spend that time working. Let's spend that time getting better. That's what the simulator does. It makes you practice more efficiently. And I believe in my heart that that's the way to get better as an athlete, so that's my backyard. I have a world-class batting machine that the Yankees and the Red Sox have, and now 20 other teams have it. 2 other teams are getting it. I got it before them. I've had the updated one for a while, and I put in 4 cameras in my backyard so I can film the kid from above, which is a great view. In fact, I've had 21 major leaguers come to my house because they want to see that view. Very few people have a camera right over home plate. I got one from the front, from the side, one from the other side, and then one from the front that you see every day on television from center field. And they're all synchronized so they can watch themselves swing. And they can see what they're doing. Instantaneous feedback to the athlete. So what do you think I did for the resident? I don't have them hit in my backyard, but I film them operating. And I've been doing that for 6 or 7 years. And the resident says, I had one guy say, that's not me. I said, okay, you're right, bro, that's not you. I hired an actor to look like you. That's literally what he told me, that's not me. I said, yeah, that's you. I don't stand like that. Well, somebody's standing like that looks a hell of a lot like you. He couldn't believe it was him, how bent over he was. I don't sound that way. Well, actually, that is the way you sound because that's your voice on the recorder. I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. Literally, that was one response I got from a PGY3. Never saw himself operate. Never saw how he stood. Never saw how he really was yelling. Never saw what he was doing to his assistant, which was me. Just he pushed me out of the way. I was like this. I couldn't help him. But he said, could you move over? I said, sure. I know I'm filming it, so I'm happy to make him look bad. But I'm trying to help him. That is a quick way to see yourself and immediately correct it. And on this machine, it allows me to put fastball, slider, curveball, and put in whether he pitches from the stretch, 76 miles an hour up to 105 miles an hour. And so my youngest son, who's a switch hitter, doesn't like the ball up and in, especially when it's cold. So what do you think we do in Birmingham every time it's under 45 degrees? I say, son, you are so blessed today. What an opportunity the good Lord's given you. We're going to go outside and hit high inside fastballs lefty. That's where he's weak. You got to work on your weakness. And he enjoys the process most of the time. Some days he doesn't want to. I say, great, I'm happy to stay in the house. This is a picture. Let me see. He's 22 now, so this is 20 years ago. Yeah, that makes sense. I've been in Birmingham 18 years. This is at the Mayo Clinic. This is my youngest son, Robbie, not named after me, named after my dad. And I'm teaching him to hit. Notice he's hitting righty, but he throws lefty. And this is my youngest son of one of the teams I coached here playing defense. But look, I'm filming. And I was the only crazy guy to film 6-year-old basketball. But I didn't lose a game for 3 years. They kicked me out of the league because we never lost because I cheated. I filmed all the other teams. I mean, what do you do when they're 7? They only have 4 plays. I knew every play they were going to do. I had my kids prepare for it. Some parents gave me a hard time. I said, listen, this is America. That's the job. The job is to win. And I had one lady said, well, these are 7-year-old kids. I don't care if they're 7, 2, or 3. I'm creating a culture here. So I got a little hard time for that. Then I moved my kids into a public school, system where they played, instead of playing teams that had 40 kids in the class, the teams that had 500 kids in the class. We didn't do quite as well. We lost in the championship 2 years in a row. But videotaping, that's my middle son videotaping these kids playing. I don't know how else to get better. And designing plays and teaching them how to get ready. And this is a great picture. I notice I've lost a lot of hair here, I'm sorry. But it's a great picture because we had all these set plays. This kid right now, Warren Shader, you look at the ESPN, he's a number 4 ranked quarterback in the country. I've coached him since he was 3 years old in baseball, basketball, football. He's given up baseball. I think it was the biggest mistake of his life because he's only going to be 6'1", 6'2". I don't see him going on the show in football, but he's a very, very good high school quarterback. This is my other son right now who's ranked, and this kid over here is actually ranked in swimming. And so I'm really proud of that because I don't care what, none of them play basketball. They're not going to play basketball. Look at them. That's fine. It was a process and a commitment to be excellent. And that's all I wanted. That's what I want for the resident. That's what I want for the medical student. I don't care if you go into internal medicine. Just get into it and make yourself as good as you can. And so I love coaching on many different levels. And I would say that this is what we do. We practice individual skills and we have pregame. We study films, but instead of studying a film of a team, it's the angiogram or it's the CT scan or the MRI. We have our pregame meal. We put on our lucky socks and we go to the operating room. We check in the mirror, we're ready to go. We check our ego at the door, and we try to work as a team to get a W. And this is where surgeons have missed the mark there. We have no team building skills, or we don't. Now, you have an MBA, and I have an MBA, and we learned that in our MBA, but we really didn't learn it in our training, and I think we sort of need to do that. You're going to get bad calls from the anesthesiologist, from a nurse telling you there's a delay, from a patient in another room having a problem, someone in the ER bleeding, whatever it is, and you got to go on. You got to live in the moment. You and your team have to regroup and refocus because of this continuous process of being a master for the patient who's asleep, because that's who we serve. And we work under bright lights. But just because you're really good at individual skills doesn't mean you're great when the pressure is on. And I've unfortunately seen a lot of skilled surgeons fall apart when the pressure's on, which really surprised me. But I've seen it. Or they're good, but they're so busy yelling at their team that their team underperforms. That's on you. You own that because you generated that reaction from your teammate. And that's something that also can be trained unequivocally. And so I submit to you that these bright lights are no different than those bright lights. They're exactly the same mentally, although the skill set may be a little bit different. And so what do? Well, we don't sit in the locker room, but maybe we sit in the lounge. And if the case didn't go well, we talk about someone who does what we do and say, hey, listen, I lost control of the pulmonary artery today. Well, how the hell did that happen? I don't know, the resident. Everyone blames the resident, the fellow. No, that was you, bro. Why did that happen? And you got to talk about it, and that's what we do. And surgeons all get injured. Who here has had some health issue or injury? Yeah, most of us. That's not unlucky. That's part of life. Deal with it. Get ready for it. It's going to happen. Prepare yourself for some type of injury, physical, mental, something, and be prepared when you're healthy that that day is going to come. Enjoy the blessings you have while you're healthy, but realize that that's finite, and there's going to be something you have to get over. And then you can talk about what you did well and what you did wrong, but the things you learn the most from is your mistakes. You don't learn too much when things go great. So really when something is going terrible, and my second lobectomy yesterday was really tough with calcified nodes, I said to the visitor from Singapore, I said, we're so lucky. He goes, why? This is a horrible case. I said, yeah, because we're going to struggle here. We're going to learn something through this one. He had big calcified nodes, and we got it done. And it was lucky to have the opportunity to be struggling. And that's the way you have to see it. I didn't see it that way at first. So it's an opportunity to learn and a chance to grow. So if you desire mastery in multiple roles, it requires critical self-reflection, which I know I don't do very well. And my wife, if she was here, would remind me of that all the time, but I've gotten much better at it. And I think you got to write it down to be objective to do it. Robotic Surgery offered me a videotape of everything I did, and there's nothing worse than struggling in the OR for 3 hours and then going home and having to watch the damn thing again. But that's what I did. Waiting 15 seconds, nothing's happening. No instruments coming in. I got a hole in the artery. Why isn't that Ray Tech in the field? And so I showed this to my team, and we got better and better. And now I've done more robotic surgery than anybody in the world by more than 200 cases. And I'm proud of that. But that's because our team has gotten better. Not because I've gotten better, my team. Our database I'll talk about tomorrow. And I'll ask you, what new objectively measured metric have you added to your database for this, to be a better parent? I mean, you know, my wife and I had an incredible marriage, I think, but I was happy taking her out once every 3 weeks. My God, I got a cup of coffee sometimes at night. We really didn't have a date night, but we would do stuff as the kids got older. And I looked at that, I said, let's do this every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks we should be able to at least for 15 minutes go down to Dunkin' Donuts, which was down the street. They just built one in Birmingham because they're a northern company. There weren't many in Birmingham. And we would go for 15 minutes every 2 weeks. I look back now and saying, what an idiot I am. I should have done it every day. But I didn't think about it because I assumed she'd always be there for me. Don't make that assumption. You might be wrong. So don't assume you're going to stay healthy. And this is a picture of my wife, and I'm not going to look at it because it still messes me up. But this is a while ago, of course. After 3 children, who knows what P90X is? Who here has done P90X, the workout tapes? She would do it with me all the time. Look at her abs after 3 kids. She was in incredible shape all the way up until the year before she got sick. And so I taught this to my kids. My problem is I'm always beating them, pushing them. I want to see a fire inside. And my wife said, well, you know, it's good to have that, but maybe it's better, instead of having a hot, intense, burning flame all the time, like I unfortunately am, maybe it's better to have a smoldering flame, an eternal flame that's going to last. Somewhere in there is the right answer for you as a person, and somewhere in there is the right answer for you as a coach, but it's a different answer for each athlete, each resident. My older son and younger son, I can go to the whip. When I would come out to the mound, I could say, what the hell is wrong with you? You know, we're losing, we're winning the game 3-2 and you just walk the guy. Try throwing a strike. If I said that to my middle son, he wouldn't do well. So my middle son, I would go out and say, you know, Alec, it'd be nice if you threw a strike here because it's a one-run game, brother, and you just walk the tying run, and we can't do that now. Settle down and throw a strike. You gotta have different love languages for different athletes, especially residents. And it's hard for us because we don't know them as well as we know our own children. My wife was sort of the ultimate team player. She enjoyed serving, and that's a picture of her serving our last Thanksgiving meal together before she got ill. She had breast cancer and got chemotherapy for breast cancer 2 years ago, and that chemo caused a leukemia. And I was so stupid I didn't even figure it out, because 2 years later she had back pain. I remember saying to her, oh, suck it up, you'll be fine. It's probably nothing, typical Cerfolio answer. Well, a week later, it really got bad. And then she got a CAT scan and showed, or a PET scan showed 4 bony metastases, and I assumed it was breast, but it turned out to be AML. Diagnosed in November of 2013, and then she passed away in April of 2013, yeah, so a year and a half ago. So it's just life. And this is the main thing that I tell my kids all the time, and that is culture and hard work are going to eat talent every day. And it really is true, especially for teams, especially team sports. I mean, you see it again and again and again. So when I think of my son, here he is, as a 7-year-old, this is my oldest son, Robbie. He played for the Dodgers. Hitting righty, but a lefty pitcher. And years of dedication in the classroom got him 21 Division I scholarships, and of course he picks the place. I got to pay $54 grand a year. Really a stupid decision, but it's okay, because there's no athletic scholarships at Princeton or Harvard or Yale, but he went there, and he got drafted as a junior, as a lefty pitcher. And I didn't let him go, because I don't value that. I value the education, and I assumed he's going to get drafted much higher his senior year. And he would have. He was projected to go in the 4th round and had Tommy John surgery. So he got injured. Now he's recovering from that, hopes to get redrafted this year as he studies for his MCATs. But the point is, that's life. Injuries are part of it. Deal with it. Maybe you trained wrong. Maybe your nutrition wasn't perfect. Get better. Don't make excuses and work harder. This is my middle son, who also had multiple scholarships, who wasn't fast. And I said, well, if your metrics is you want to run a 60 in 6.7, and right now you're running 7.1, how are we going to get there? Well, we set up this simulated model. I helped design this because he wasn't using his arms with our speed coach. And he shaved that down and was Scholar Athlete of the Year in Birmingham. That's my middle son. This is my youngest son, who is a terrible quarterback. The worst quarterback ever to play the sport, in my opinion, no matter what he tells you. Always threw the ball in the red zone, interceptions galore. And he told me because he didn't have a good field goal kicker. Well, sure, you don't have a good field goal kicker. You're 8 years old. No one kicks field goals at 8. They're terrible. Doesn't mean we need to turn the ball over inside the 15. But he got pretty good at baseball. And right now he's being recruited by some really good schools and some schools that are really good in baseball. And I'm hoping he makes a good choice. You know, the LSU coach really likes him. And they're offering him a little bit of money now. And I'm watching his eyeballs because we went to LSU and there's a lot of very good-looking women there. And when we went to Harvard, there weren't so many good-looking women. And unfortunately, that's a factor when you're 18 and you ain't too smart. But we're trying to get him redirected as to where we think is going to do better for him in life. And I come back to her because the reason they've been so successful is, you know, the play that you have. And so don't forget the importance of what you have at home, like I did a little bit, because I just assumed she'd always be there. Don't forget why you get up early and work hard. Don't forget at the end of the day, your kid's job is to leave you. Your kid's job is to go away and do something else because that's what you train them to do. Go be successful, work hard, and raise their own family. And it's going to be you and your spouse. And at the end of the day, that's who you should be committed to. And I was committed to her, but I never thought that she wouldn't be here with me at 52 or 53 or whatever I am. And although she passed away in April 2013, it was a new start for her. And I hope to see her one day. I know that I will. So in conclusion, and I'm doing okay on time, you can't be these things. You can't unless you become as good as you can be. So it's okay to go get that award. It's okay to go get that accolade. It's okay to get the highest GPA in the class. It's okay to want to get honors in your surgical rotation as a medical student. In fact, it's laudable and you should do it because it's going to make you better. Not the goal, not the award, but the process of getting there is what's going to make you great. And it's going to make you better at these other things. And you super perform when you do all these things that we talked about. When you prepare, really prepare before something you're going to do. Really prepare for that operation. My son's taking the ACTs in 3 weeks. He told me he's ready. He's not ready. He hasn't really prepared the way he could. And you seek out opportunities. You identify your lines of gratification. You are beacons to other around you because you understand that's what it's all about. That you can shrink your ego and prepare your response. That you can be coachable and be a coach. That you can learn from loss. That you can desire mastery and understand the master knows mastery is never obtainable, but you like the process of trying to get there. And then you set objective goals that you actually can measure and that are reasonable. And so it's hard to retire when you like to super perform. It's hard to do that. And that's something at the next phase of some of our lives we have to grapple with. And it's best when we're connected to our families. You perform so much better in your arena if things at home are good. Just ask Tiger Woods, and let's look at how the hell he's done since the golf club to the head incident. Not so well, because it's a loss of connectedness to what really was driving him, in my opinion. And winning is empty when there's no one to share it with, and that's what I found out in the last year and 5 months, and I'm working on that one for me. And what I've learned with my partners is you will eventually value the accomplishments of others much more than yourself. So if that's true, why don't you just understand it at 18, 19, 20, 25, and don't wait till you're 50 like me to figure it out. It's hard to do that. You know, my reflection is really ugly, and that's just part of it. But if I can see it and I want to get better, then it's okay. But you got to be objective with this. My children, unfortunately, have some clouded lens on their mirror, but we're working on cleaning it off daily. And I think that's what we need to do, to really look at ourselves and objectively measure what we've done and what we can do. And so I think if you desire to be the best surgeon in the world, that's a laudable goal, but is it? Or if you want to be the best teacher, then others can carry on what you've taught them. And so when you pass away, things are still happening and your mark has been left even when you're not there. If you're the best father, you'll have your children. If you're the best friend to somebody, Your friend will be a good friend to somebody else because of you. You're the best teacher, you've taught others. So pursuing mastery is good. In fact, it's great. In fact, I want you to do it. But realize it's not obtainable, and realize the pathway to it is much more important. No matter what your job is, enjoy that process. And then, I don't care if you're selling bonds on Wall Street. And not that that's not valuable, but to me, it's just pushing numbers around. Those guys have charities. I know a guy who does that, who operates a giant hedge fund, makes millions of dollars a year, is now giving that back to the community. Find a way to pursue goals that offer endless significance. So it's been my great honor to be here with you, Dr. Gordon Murray, and everybody, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have your attention. Thank you so much.